Hello, everyone. This is Whitney Will from Star Hearth Astrology, and I'm here today to talk about the sun's time in the sign of Gemini, known to astrologers as Gemini season. So in this video, I'll go over kind of the big things that are happening in astrology, as well as some of the smaller transits. The best way to listen to these videos and really pull the personal out of them is to have your birth chart sitting in front of you so that when I'm talking about different signs of the zodiac, you can be connecting that with different houses in your birth chart where you have that sign. So if you've never looked at your birth chart and you want a primer or help in doing that, you can go to my website and I can give you a natal chart reading. Or if you have looked at your birth chart and are just more interested in going deeper, I really recommend having your birth chart with you when you listen to or watch these videos, because you can really learn so much about yourself and start paying attention to transits and what's happening for you. As well as if you have a couple other birth charts of people close to you, so you can kind of see how it's going to be different based on people's birth charts. Okay, so let's talk about Gemini season 2021, because it's some of the busiest astrology in the whole year. There's a whole bunch of stuff that gets layered on top of itself. There's a bunch of kind of trickster archetypes embedded in the mix. So we're dealing with a lot of unpredictability. So, we're kind of in this expect the unexpected place a little bit. In that, especially when you're working with eclipses, it's really, really hard to make predictions about which eclipses are going to be ones that blow the doors off of things and which ones are going to pass silently by and not affect you too much, because eclipses are really trigger points of major chapter beginnings and endings. But right, if you have ever read a chapter book, sometimes chapters end, with like cliffhanger explosion. Some of them kind of fade out. And so we can say that that is also true for eclipses. So in this video, the main things that I'm going to be talking about for Gemini season are eclipse season, Jupiter's recent ingress into Pisces, so Jupiter's time in Pisces, where he will be for the next 2 months or so. I'm going to be talking about the Mercury retrograde that will start in the middle of Gemini season, and I will also be talking about the second Saturn-Uranus square. So those are kind of our main storylines going forward. We've got a few other things happening. Like I said, this is a really, really busy month in astrology. So let's jump right in. I've started talking a little bit about eclipses, so let's talk about eclipses. So we are about to head into what is called eclipse season. Different astrologers will count this different ways. So the way that I kind of map eclipse season and the way that I'll talk about it is eclipse season starts with the first eclipse lunation. So that's the first new moon or full moon that is a solar or lunar eclipse. And then I count eclipse season as lasting all the way until the first uneclipsed lunation. So the first uneclipsed full moon or new moon. So some people will count it from the first, the last uneclipsed one. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of different ways to count it. Some people only count eclipse season as kind of the window between the two eclipsed lunations, but that's not what I do. So the first eclipse lunation that we have is on May 26th. We have a Sagittarius full moon. So that's a lunar eclipse. Full moons are lunar eclipses. New moons are solar eclipses. And so we open with a lunar eclipse, which in some ways I like better because it kind of clears the playing field before new things start. with that full moon, it's kind of, we're reaching a culmination. We are starting to pivot back around, and we have that. And then we have kind of the new beginning of the new moon. So we have that Sagittarius full moon lunar eclipse on May 26th, and then we have a Sagittarius full moon, Gemini new moon, solar eclipse that happens on June 10th. And so I want you to stick a pin in your mind around June 10th, because a whole bunch of things happen right there. There's kind of this like screeching halt, maybe signaled by the eclipse. And a bunch of things are going to transition right after that. So just stick a pin in your mind right there. And so then that second eclipse will be in effect until we have a Capricorn full moon that happens on June 22nd, I think. Yeah. So just after the solstice. And so that actually happens in Cancer season. So we're not going to worry about that. But just for knowing, eclipse season is going to last from May 26th until June 22nd. And so what do I mean by eclipse season? Why am I talking about this? How is time different? So the eclipses happen when we have new moons or full moons that fall on either side of the lunar nodes. So within 12 to 15 degrees on either side of the lunar nodes. And the nodes in your birth chart really represent kind of the story that you're trying to write with your life, or the story that you feel like you can't help writing, right? We all have a sense of kind of where we've come from and where we're going, which is kind of this internal sense. And the nodes really do a lot to tell us about that story for us, to tell us how much weight is in that story, the types of characters or the types of themes that we might associate with that story. And so the transiting nodes are going to end up being fairly similar. So right now we have the North Node moving through Gemini and the South Node moving through Sagittarius. That has been true for about a year now. And so what the South Node does is it clears things out, and the North Node is kind of hungry for things and pulls things in. So it's kind of saying, okay, we're shedding the worn out Sagittarian things, and we are renewing, we're getting curious, we're getting playful, we're reviving the Gemini things. So we're kind of doing a rebalancing of those archetypes. Now in 9 years, it's going to flip when the North Node hits Gemini, or the North Node hits Sag, and the South Node hits Gemini. So every 9 years, we kind of rebalance the signs. And so we're rebalancing the stories. And so the way to work with this in your chart is to look at the houses that you have Gemini and Sagittarius in. And right, all houses are bound along polarities, so are signs. And so, right, it's this rebalancing of doing less, having less of a bias towards the Sagittarius place and more of a bias maybe towards, or maybe bias is the wrong word, preference towards the Gemini place. And so that will be falling along an axis. Again, if you want to dive deeper into this, I provide readings, and we can focus just on the lunar nodes, on your natal nodes, on the transiting nodes. So we've kind of been in that storyline of whatever that story looks like for you, whatever the story of those houses are, some old beliefs that you've had about them, and opening kind of new windows into the Gemini area of your house. We've been in that story for about a year now, because we had eclipses in those signs start on June 5th of 2020, so almost a year ago. And then we kind of, we head into that story with the June 5 eclipse, and then we get kind of our first big changes in that area happening in the eclipses that happened on November 30th and December 14th of 2020. So that was our first kind of eclipse season in these signs. So now we are headed into our second full eclipse season in these signs. So what are we looking at? We are looking at a Sagittarius full moon. And what full moons are is they're kind of culminations in the sense of you've gone as far as you can go in one direction, and whether internal stimuli or external stimuli happen, and you realize that you've reached some kind of culmination, or you've seen something through to a turning point. And so what happens, right, when the moon reaches its maximum distance away from the sun, and then it's going to come back. So, right, we've pushed and pushed and pushed against the world from a new moon perspective. Now we have matured in ourself. We're pushing against the world. We're kind of at our peak, and we are going to start coming back around. So we're going to start gathering what the world has to offer, the lessons that we learned from that interaction. We're going to go into a receptive rather than active way of being. So a more feminine, the waning cycle of the moon is more feminine. I don't mean female, I mean feminine. Obviously, everyone has both of them inside of them. So when we hit this Sagittarius full moon eclipse, what we are seeing is the culmination of storylines that began with the December 14th Sagittarius solar eclipse. And so we can see how far we've come. And now these eclipses are about the south node. So so those eclipses were about seeing what was missing in our lives, or noticing what we needed to get rid of. And so then we've just had about the past 5.5 months to do that. And this full moon is really the place where we take stock, see how far we've pushed those storylines, and release them. I will do another kind of full video on this. Maybe we'll do some meditations in that video on discovering how to release and what we're ready to release. If you leave in the comments whichever house you have Sagittarius in your birth chart, I will speak to those houses directly in my video. So we're clearing space in the Sagittarius place. You're boxing up that stuff and finally taking it to the consignment store. Then 2 weeks later, we have a new moon solar eclipse in the Gemini house. And this is, I think, a really, really important eclipse because we only get one North Node Gemini solar eclipse in this whole eclipse cycle. So we get 2 solar eclipses in Sag, one that happened on December 14th of 2020, the second one happens December 4th of 2021. We get 2 of those. We only get one solar eclipse in Gemini. And so we've got a solar eclipse on the North Node. We're calling things in. Now, you do not want to do any kind of like manifesting ritual, any kind of like new beginning stuff on eclipses, because they're very volatile. And, they'll say that the veil between worlds is thin and you don't want to summon any demons or whatever. I don't even know. But it's not so good juju to do kind of manifesting magic. Listen. That doesn't mean like don't honor the time, don't feel the qualitative time, but really at new moons, it's really about getting in touch with ourselves and feeling what's beginning in us without our conscious mind making decisions about it, right? And we're talking about eclipses, so we're talking about the nodes, and nodes feel fatey. They feel fated, they feel fatey. It somewhat feels out of your control generally. And that's when you can really tell that the nodes are really functioning, is when things are starting to feel like fate. So, yeah, so in this Gemini new moon solar eclipse, new things are coming in. And so that doesn't mean you pick out what they are and write them down in your journal or make vision boards or whatever. It means like just keep your ears open for knocks at the door and then vet them So, right, with eclipses, we can have gnarly stuff come in too. So just be really mindful about the stuff that's beginning. With the North Node can get way, way overblown. So you don't want to be doing too much Gemini stuff. So just be mindful of that. On the same day of that North Node eclipse, we have the cazimi of the Sun and Mercury, the midpoint of the Mercury retrograde. So there's this kind of moment of insight, which may kind of stop you in your tracks. This pause where you realize this piece of information that's going to change the whole story. And that could be the pivot of the eclipses. And I'll talk more about that when we talk about Mercury retrograde. So those are kind of the pieces about the eclipses. I will make individual videos for each of the eclipses, and I have 2 events going on, one for each eclipse, with 2 different card readers who are not going to help us manifest things or do kind of magic stuff that we wouldn't want to do on eclipses, but are going to read for how to connect with guides and how to find paths through the eclipses that really honor our authentic self. So you can find links for that on my website. I really hope to see some of you there. They should be sweet little times of connection and really just sitting with the energy and preparing us to enter the sacred kind of vessel of eclipse season. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about before we get into the transits themselves is Jupiter in Pisces. So Jupiter in Pisces went into Pisces in Taurus season, but that was about a week ago. And it's a really important piece of Gemini season as well. So Jupiter spends about 13 months in each sign. So a little over a year. This is actually Jupiter's year to be in Aquarius, but he takes a little 2.5-month vacation in Pisces. And that is really, really important for all of us because he spent the last 2 years in signs ruled by Saturn with Saturn. And so it's kind of been this kind of double oppressiveness in terms of Jupiter being able to help us out, getting the things done that we need to get done, or, just making things easier rather than harder. Jupiter has kind of had his hands tied in a lot of ways. But Pisces is Jupiter's own sign, and so his hands are not tied in Pisces. And so there is a kind of rising tide lifts all boats vibe to this. Things should be feeling, if not easier, like there's more hope. You have faith that things will get easier in that sense, and that feeling is easier to access. Now, we also have to be careful. Jupiter says yes too much. Pisces is the sign of holy longing, and so getting swept up in dangerous belief systems, conspiracy theories, can be part of this transit. So, yeah, I think that's all I'll say. Don't be so open-minded that your brain falls out. Okay, I think the other piece that is important is that Jupiter is in Pisces for eclipse season. And the other sign that Jupiter rules is Sagittarius. So I would not be surprised if we have a little bit more of a positive experience with these eclipses because the ruler of Sag is in much better condition than he was when he was in his fall in Capricorn during the November and December eclipses. So that is a hopeful little piece for me. Okay, with that, let's hop into the slides and the transits and look at the rest of Gemini season. Okay, so when the sun goes into Gemini on Thursday, the 20th, we are in the second quarter of the lunar month. It actually just started on Wednesday, so we still have that waxing energy. So we should have kind of the first week be the most active week of Gemini season. The sun goes into Gemini, and then the sun is going to square Jupiter. And when planets square benefics, so Jupiter or Venus, it's not necessarily bad, even though the square is a relationship of conflict, right? The squares are in the nature of Mars, action, decisiveness, the sun and Jupiter squaring each other. Jupiter's just at the beginning of Pisces. The sun is just at the beginning of Gemini. There's a lot of potential for inspiration that happens with this square. And so I'm excited about that. And I think I'm really excited about the way that Gemini season starts. Then the day after, we have Mercury square to Neptune. And this is a big story, and it's a big story because of Mercury's retrograde. It's going to stay really close to that square a whole bunch. It's also going to go exact 4 times. And so this is really an aspect for the revelation of secrets. Divine inspiration, but also delusion, Neptune. And so we may, with its kind of dynamics with the retrograde, this may tell a story of discovering pieces of information. So this is the first one on the 22nd, and then we will have another one on June 5th. So still in Gemini season while Mercury is retrograde. And then we have the final one before Mercury leaves Gemini on July 6th. So we've got about a month and a half of Mercury square Neptune. And so really don't believe everything you think. This is the transit for don't believe everything you think. We're going to have Saturn station retrograde right after that. So when the outer planets station retrograde, when a malefic stations retrograde, it's not such a bad thing, but we may see excessive Saturnian things happen around then. So that means experiencing limitation. It means having a delay in what's happening. I think it will be a really good transit for grounding this Mercury-Neptune square, for having us be able to really kind of vet our ideas and think twice about things. That's something that Saturn helps us do. Then we have a few days after that, I think it's Tuesday or Wednesday. Wednesday, early in the morning for all time zones in the US, we will have the Sagittarius full moon lunar eclipse. I'm not going to talk about it anymore because I talked about it a ton at the beginning of this video, and I'll release another video specifically about it where I look at the chart and we go through it all. I also have that event. Sign up. It's going to be fun. And the next day we have Venus square to Neptune. And so we've got these Mercury, Venus squares to Neptune. We really, really don't know what we want. We really, really don't know what we think. And as uncomfortable as uncertainty is, at this point, it's a safer place to be than certainty, which is probably diluted. So yeah, if we're coasting on assumptions right here, we will have to revise them later. So then the next day, we have Venus conjoined Mercury. And I think that this is really interesting because at the end of April, I think it was April 24th or 25th, we had another Venus-Mercury conjunction, but it was in Taurus, in Venus's sign. And this time they're conjoining in Gemini, in Mercury's sign. So it's less about the Venusian stuff, more about the mercurial stuff. This is... it would be a great time to buy something, except for Mercury stations retrograde the next day, so you don't actually want to do that. But this is a great time to send out a reconciliation note. If you have been having conflict with someone, or you've been avoiding a conversation, this would be a great time to make it happen, because the potential that you will be able to find the words is heightened. And even if it takes the next few weeks to kind of piece it all back together, and you guys have a series of letters or whatever, emails, that is a perfect thing to do on for Mercury retrograde. And this configuration happening right on the eve of Mercury retrograde makes me think that we have the potential for a lot of reconciliation in these weeks. Then the next day, Mercury stations retrograde at 24 degrees of Gemini. So if you find 24 degrees of Gemini in your chart, check if you have anything around that, if you have anything at around that degree of any of the mutable signs. So that's Virgo, Pisces, Sagittarius, and Gemini. All of that stuff will be activated by that Mercury retrograde station. So the station points can be the most intense, where everything kind of breaks down. Because then what we're going to do is revisit it during the retrograde, and then we're going to integrate everything that we learned once Mercury goes direct. So the best thing that you can do in these days is just make every plan with a lot of flexibility, and just have patience and understand that you may have everything that you are doing, you may have to do more than once. And that's fine. That's what you're going to do. And having that expectation going into it allows you to maintain emotional equilibrium, to not get too frustrated, to not panic, to just understand this is the quality of time. It is time to revisit. It is time to slow down. It is time to journal. It is time to go inward. It is time to be more receptive, and to release assumptions. So that's what we got. And then the Sun conjunct the North Node several days after that, on the very last day of May. So that's going to be a Monday. That is a Monday to kind of go get it. Sun conjunct the North Node is really, really idealistic, really, really enthusiastic, really, really in pursuit of its own authenticity. And so that will be, that's a Monday to really connect with your purpose and make things happen. Okay. Pretty quickly after that, the following Wednesday, June 2nd, we head into the fourth quarter of the lunar month. So this is going to be the slowest one, where the moon is waning down to a nubbin of nothing. And so this is really not the time to kind of make stuff happen. This is the time to finish stuff up, put things away, clear things out, add to your compost pile, finish up projects. And the kind of finishing up projects is underscored by Mercury's retrograde. Another great thing to do while Mercury is in retrograde is to finish things. So if there's something that you've been putting off, it's not a good time to start a new project. It's a great time to finish things. And we have Venus move into Cancer. Venus in Cancer is sweet, she's kind, she's nurturing, she's very emotional. So depending on, if you've got a hard aspect with something, if you have Venus conjoined Chiron, or Venus square Saturn in Cancer, she can be reactive because she's so sensitive. And she will move into a square with Chiron, actually, while she is in Cancer. But we get a softer Venus, a Venus ruled by the moon. She's also getting really close to Mars, though their conjunction does not perfect until they are both in the sign of Leo. So she's going to chase Mars all the way through Cancer, but they won't connect until 19 degrees of Leo in July. Then we have Mercury's second square to Neptune. So this is going to be the one where the bubble pops. If there is a secret to be revealed, if there's hidden information that that needs to be revealed, Mercury square to Neptune retrograde is going to either get a sense of that or possibly discover it. This could be pulling the wool off your eyes kind of transit. And at the same time, we have Mars opposite Pluto, which can have huge overreactions. So if there is a secret revealed, Mars opposite Pluto, especially Mars in its fall, there could be, this is kind of a violent thing. This is like the discovery of a lie that ends in violence. So I would be just careful and make space for your big emotions. It's not about, it's coming, so you're not going to have them. No, still have them. Your body needs you to move through them. But make space, make safe space for them. And when it's happening with other people, give them more space. Don't add fuel to the fire. We will have a Gemini new moon. I guess the thing about that quarter of the month is like, those are two kind of, while one is volatile, it's not a very busy week. And that feels like right on cue for the fourth quarter of the moon. Then we have the first quarter. So it's going to begin with that Gemini new moon solar eclipse, which I will talk about in a different video. I have an eclipse ceremony for you to sign up for, and I talked about a lot at the beginning of this video, so I'm not going to say too much about it. At the same time as that, though, we have the Sun Mercury cazimi, which marks the midpoint of the retrograde cycle. So the Sun Mercury cazimi is going to happen at 20 degrees and the eclipse happens at 19 degrees. So it's basically happening at the same time, right on top of it. And so it's really bound up in this eclipse cycle. And that is so cool for me because when I was researching this eclipse cycle, I found that on December 4th, the December 4th eclipse that happens this year also has a Sun-Mercury conjunction, but this time Mercury is direct, so it's not retrograde, but it's in Sagittarius, which is a sign of its detriment, whereas this one, it's in Gemini, the sign of its rulership. And so I feel like that has to be tied in. And it feels really related to, I talked before about the nodes being the story that we're writing. There's really some very, very serious revisions happening via Mercury. And this feels really important. It's like you make a hard left and you decide you need to go in a completely different direction because you get totally new information. Yeah, I think it could be really cool. Eclipses, they don't always have something happen exactly on the day. They kind of mark out sections of time. So you really have 6 months until the Gemini full moon for this to play out. The Gemini full moon is not eclipsed. We are moving out of Gemini and Sag eclipses. And so we will have our first eclipse with the Taurus full moon that happens on November 19th. So our first eclipse in that polarity starts in November, and we will have an uneclipsed Gemini full moon that will round this out. So potent what you begin, and just pay attention. And again, check in with the Gemini part of your chart. Then the next day, so remember I said stick a pin in this. We have Mars into Leo. Thank goodness. Mars has been in Cancer since April 23rd, so we had about 6 weeks of Mars in Cancer, a little bit more. Mars is in its fall in Cancer because it's ruled by the moon, and the moon is changeable and does things when they feel right in the body. And Mars, as our actions, is going to not always feel like doing what we planned on doing. When Mars is in Cancer, it's going to overreact emotionally. I've really been connecting with Mars in Cancer through being a mom. This is the first time I've been a mom with Mars in Cancer, and realizing when you're a mom how hard it is to get things done. Cancer is the sign of the mother. And right, there's this, it's super frustrating because you've got your list of things to do, and when you mix in childcare, it means that nothing is kind of direct. Occasionally it is. He's sleeping right now, so I'm making this video. So you have Mars into Leo, and Mars in Leo becomes Braveheart. It is the warrior of the heart, and it's very passionate, can be very hot-headed, but at least it has dried off from the Cancerian pieces. So I think we'll see a lot of changes, especially if Mars is activated as the Time Lord for you, if Mars is the Lord of the year. Then we will have the Sun square to Neptune. Delusions and inspiration. It's just going to be part of it. But what's happening right around then is the second exact square between Saturn and Uranus. So this is the headline of 2021, these Saturn-Uranus squares. I have written articles about this. I'm writing more articles about my research into these Saturn-Uranus squares. I'm working with all of my clients with the Saturn-Uranus squares. This is really the tension between the way of the future and the status quo. This is the tension between thinking that if things are going to change, they have to change all the way to whatever your ideal is, and any compromise is betrayal and cancel culture and burn the whole house down if you can't have your way. It's a lot of that. There's a lot of power struggles. We are re-evaluating our systems of value. What are they here for after the pandemic? Why are we providing $3.8 billion a year to Israel colonizing Palestine? And right, we are asking those questions. We are getting angry about those answers. We are pushing things to a breaking point. When this square almost perfected last year, around the same time, we had the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor protests happening. And you see that when you look back through history. Saturn in Aquarius leads civil rights movements. And with its square to Uranus, there are tripwires everywhere that can set things off. So be careful. And I think especially when we have all of these Mercury-Neptune squares about delusional thinking, and everybody is really wound up on a number of topics and a number of fronts, this is a possible flashpoint. So the first one happened on February 17th. This is the second one on June 14th. The third exact one we will get on December 24th, so Christmas Eve. So buckle your seatbelts for this one. Could be really big, especially coming off of eclipse season. Things could really, really change really fast, Gemini season this year. And we've got the waxing energy of the moon. So then we move into the second quarter of the moon. And we have on the solstice, Jupiter stationing retrograde. Not a big deal. Jupiter is a good guy. It's totally fine. We might expect to see more Jupiter and Pisces gifts happen around then, because planets, the volume goes up on them around their station degrees. We have the sun move into Cancer, which happens every year for the summer solstice. And hopefully we all made it through. A couple days after that, we have a Capricorn full moon on the 22nd, which hopefully will ground us a little bit. It will mean that we are definitely fully out of eclipse season, and we can really kind of get the lay of the land about where the work is now that life looks like it does. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Please like and share this video, leave comments below, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. This is Whitney Will from Star Hearth Astrology. Thank you for watching, and I wish you a flexible, bendable, yoga-y Gemini season. Catch you later.